Alrighty. Hi, everyone. I am Maddie. Welcome to our very first author web chat. If you're here, you are probably a monthly donor. So this is exclusive for monthly donors in the fall. I have with me here Jessica Vitalis, a brand new debut author. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jessica Vitalis, and I am the author of The Wolf's Curse, which came out with HarperCollins Green Willow in September. And I have a second book coming out next fall as well.
So do you have the title already? Can you tell us?
We cannot share the title just yet. It's
Okay.
top secret still.
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear when we can hear. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jessica. I have a bunch of questions for you about writing, about the business of writing, and of course, about your brand new book. So I'll just kind of jump into it. I was wondering if you could tell us when you began to write.
Yeah, so I have pretty much been writing my whole life. I've always loved to write. And when I was a kid, I wrote a lot. We moved a lot. Like I went to 24 different schools, not 24 different schools, but I lived in 24 different places before fourth grade.
Oh,
So I
wow.
didn't have a lot of friends because of all the moving. So I turned to books and I turned to writing, but I didn't know that people could actually be authors. I know that probably sounds really weird, but that was back before the internet and none of the schools I went
Right.
to, like we didn't have author visits. So I'd never met anybody who was an author and it just never occurred to me that somebody actually wrote all of the books I was reading. So it really wasn't until I went off to university and one of my professors, a nonfiction writing professor actually wrote a textbook. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I was like, wow, real people actually write books. And then he actually asked me to write an essay for the next edition of his textbook. And so that kind of was like, wow, I love to write and maybe it's something I'm good at. So that's kind of how I got started, but it still took me another at least 10 years, if not more, after that before I decided to try to actually write a book.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's so cool. Like, what a journey there. That's so fun. So I guess that kind of answers my next question, but when did you realize that you specifically like wanted to publish a novel?
Yeah, so the journey was really interesting. I actually was in business in my prior life. So I was in business and I went to Columbia Business School to get my MBA. Specifically, I was in film and television production, and I thought that I wanted to be a studio executive. So I went off to get my MBA to become an executive. And I took this really kind of strange course called Creativity and Personal Mastery, which was sort of like this self-helpish course that really didn't necessarily belong at business school at all, but it was fantastic. And one of the assignments that the professor had us do was to design our ideal career. And so we had a week to design every aspect of our ideal career. We had to design a schedule. We had to design what we would eat, who we would interact with, our salary, what our days would look like, what clothes we would wear. And I kept trying to design this sort of studio executive life for myself. And I just really wasn't that into it. And so that really compelled me to sit down and figure out like, what are my passions? And if I could do anything with my life, what would it be? And that's when I finally admitted that I would really be an author if I could do anything. So I did that. And then I graduated, and it still took me a couple more years after that. But finally, I got to a point in my life after my second daughter was born. And I just kind of realized that it was now or never. Like it's something that you just have to jump into and try, or else my whole life was going to pass me by. So that's when I finally got started. But from that time, it still took me another 13 years before I got my first book deal. So it's been a
Oh,
long
wow.
journey.
No kidding. Oh my gosh. I think that sounds like everyone in the world should like take that course and like plan that life out for themselves because it
Yeah.
sounds very life changing.
In many ways, it really was. It was a very cool course. Like they had us do things like write down for a week, carry a notebook and write down your mental chatter so that you could sort of evaluate your own mental models and how you see the world. And anyway, we could talk about that forever, but super cool course. Yeah.
That's so cool. Oh my, I want to take that course now. So you mentioned it took 13 years to publish a book. Can you talk to me a little bit about your path to like getting your agent even before publishing that book?
Yeah. So it's a little bit embarrassing, to be honest with you, because I expected it to be really easy.
Everyone does, and it never
Yeah,
is.
I thought you write a book. That's the hard part, right? Like you write this book and then you get your agent and you get published. And so that's what I did. I wrote a memoir because I thought, because of that transient, weird childhood that I had talked about, I thought that's, more unique than anything I could make up. I'll just write about that and I'll be published. Well, so I did that. I wrote my memoir and I sent it off to a whole bunch of agents and I got a really high response rate on my queries. Like I'm talking 50, 60% response
Oh,
rate.
wow. That's really
So,
good. Yeah.
yeah, really good. And even, just starting out, I knew that that was really good. So I thought that would be it. But every single agent who read passed. And not only did they pass, but one agent actually wrote back to me and said, I was really excited about this concept, and your writing was just so disappointing. I was disappointed by your story, your how you don't have any idea how to write a plot or scenes or sentences, like really letting me know that this was bad.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I didn't really consider quitting because I'm the kind of person, like, I'd already made the commitment that I wanted to become a published author, but I did step back and go, wow, this guy's probably right. Like, you wouldn't go do open heart surgery without learning how to write. So I need to teach myself how to write. So I started reading every single book I could get my hands on and reading craft books. And I wrote another novel, and that novel was a little bit better, but not great. And I wrote a third novel, and I could tell that that novel was quite a bit better. And it ended up getting me my first agent. And so at that point, I thought, finally, this is it. Now I'm going to be a published author. That didn't happen. My third book didn't sell. My fourth book didn't sell. My fifth book didn't sell. And I finally wrote a sixth book. So by now, 13 years had passed, and I had been with my first agent a long time, like 6 or 7 years. And I loved my agent. Absolutely loved my agent, but we had a heart to heart and kind of realized that what we were doing together obviously was not working. We were not selling books, and I'd kind of started writing fantasy, whereas she had signed me writing contemporary. So we decided to part ways, and that was terrifying. I mean, to write for 13 years and then walk away from your agent, not knowing if you'll get another agent, was really scary, but I got really lucky. So this is where I kind of say I have a little bit of a literary Cinderella story, because I had started mentoring Pitch Wars, which is a writing contest that some of your listeners may know about. But if you're selected by a mentor, you spend several months working on your manuscript. And I had applied to that the same year that I got my agent, and I didn't get in. But as soon as I got my agent, I applied to become a mentor. So fast forward several years, I'd been a mentor for 6 years, I think. And one of the other mentors was a writer you may have heard of by the name of Erin Entrada Kelly. Now, she is a Newbery medalist and an extraordinary author and just super cool human being. I didn't really get to know her behind the scenes of Pitch Wars because, frankly, I was too in awe of her to dare say anything to her. But she put out a call saying, hey, I'm going to teach a class at UCLA, and I'd like an opening of somebody's manuscript to workshop, and I'll send you my feedback, and I'll send feedback from my students. And since I was getting ready to query, I thought that would be amazing to get feedback from Erin. So I sent in my manuscript, and I didn't hear anything for about a month. And then one Saturday night, she emailed me and she said, I love your manuscript. I just want to let you know I'm obsessed, and I'm teaching it tomorrow, and I'll let you know how it goes. And so, of course, I was very, very excited. And I got another email from her the next day, and she said, I don't have any feedback. I ended up just using this as an example of a manuscript well done for my students. And if you want to send me the full manuscript, I'd be glad to take a look at it with an eye on passing it to my agent, because I'd mentioned that I was getting ready to start querying. So I passed it on to her, thinking just having Erin Entrada Kelly, first of all, read my words is amazing, but not any real expectation she would love it enough to pass on to her agent. But so that was a Sunday afternoon. And I woke up Monday morning with another email from Erin saying, my agent loves your manuscript and wants to set up the call.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So after 13 years, within like not even a 48-hour period, my life was just completely changed. And I signed with my current agent, and we did a light round of edits and went out on sub. And 3 weeks after we went out on sub, I got my offer for a 2-book deal. So
oh my goodness.
yeah, it was quite a journey.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, wow. And her blurb is on your cover, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's what a great, just like, I love that so much. Certainly persistence seems like the key factor in that whole journey, just trying and growing and knowing that you will get there as long as you keep trying.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, there were so many points looking back where I could have given up, and I just kept coming back to the idea that, number one, writing is what I love to do. And so I'm going to do it whether I'm published or not. But also there are so many things that you can't control in publishing. You cannot control whether you'll ever get a book deal, but what you can control is whether or not you keep going and whether you keep working on your craft and you keep getting better and better. So I just tried to stay really focused on that throughout the years. And it's really easy to look at authors and see that they get these really big publishing deals, but oftentimes you don't see all of the work that went in, the years and years and years of learning that went into learning the craft before that happens.
Absolutely. You just see the big splashy, like, ooh, look at this cool thing that happened, and not all of the best behind the scenes dirty work.
Yeah, exactly.
You're making me like want to go and write right now. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is so fun. So I wanted to ask also, what's one thing that you wish you knew at the beginning of your debut novel writing journey that you now know that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think the real turning point for me in my writing was the realization that readers read for character. So I am a very plot-driven writer. I'm very logical. I have that MBA. I like figuring out how to get from A to B. Plot comes very naturally to me. And all of that character stuff is really hard, like that deep emotional character stuff. But you can really have almost any plot and it can work for a story, but you have to have that inner transformation or that inner journey. And you have to figure out how to unlock that in order for your writing to really speak to readers. And it took me a long time to learn how to do that and to learn that it mattered.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. I think characters are just like vital. I always describe it to people as like, you would like, a story can be anything, right? But you would watch your favorite people, like just sit on a bench and like talk to people all day. Like you will listen to that story with your favorite characters, no matter what they may do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so wonderful. So I wanted to maybe pivot a little bit. I was checking out your website. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your book talks, Magic in the Middle.
Yeah, so Magic in the Middle is a series of free monthly recorded book talks that I send out via email once a month, or people can access it online on YouTube. And I read so much middle grade literature. And at the same time, as an author, I know how hard it is to stand out in the market and how hard it is for readers to connect with stories. So I wanted to do something useful with all this reading that I'm doing. So once a month, I just select one of my favorite novels and I do a short book talk and I post it, so that my hope is that readers and particularly educators and caregivers can share these videos with their students or middle grade readers and help connect them to stories they might not have otherwise considered.
Oh, that's lovely. Have you done one for The Wolf's Curse?
I have not. I have been debating whether to do one in the new year. Like it seems a little bit self-serving. So I'm trying to think of maybe like I have an idea, like maybe I'll do an interview with the great white wolf and so do some kind of twist on it to make it something a little bit fun for the readers instead of just me talking about my book. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in maybe January or February.
Well, I would absolutely love to see that because I read The Wolf's Curse and I absolutely loved it. Highly recommend to everyone. It was just like, I finished it yesterday, so I haven't completely like gotten to think through all of my feelings on it. So that's why you just kind of get this, oh, just so wonderful sort of thing. But I did want to move into talking about The Wolf's Curse. Could you give us kind of an intro on what it is, what the plot is, characters?
Yeah, sure. So The Wolf's Curse is a middle grade twist on a Grim Reaper retelling. And it's the story of a 700-year-old wolf who is looking for somebody to take her job. But the only person who can see her, because she's invisible, is a 700-year-old boy, a 12-year-old boy named Gage. And Gage actually catches the great white wolf stealing his beloved grandpapa's soul. So he ends up vowing revenge and he teams up with another orphan and they embark on a life-changing journey that reveals truths about the wolf, but also about the nature of death itself.
It's just so wonderful. And it's so different, I think, than any other middle grade. I also read a lot of middle grade. It is so different than any other one that I've read. And I think that really spoke to me. Can you tell us maybe what's new about your novel and what does separate it from other middle grade novels out there?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, just the fact that it's narrated by a Grim Reaper is very unique for the middle grade market. I mean, it's been done a few times for older readers, but not so much in the middle grade market. And then there's just all sorts of technical things that sort of separate it from what's normally done, especially for a debut novelist. So the Great White Wolf is the narrator, but she's also a character in the story. So she tells the story in a first person omniscient voice, but she often dips into close third person with the actual main character, who's the 12-year-old Gage. And then on top of that, she tells the story in present tense. So that's not typical for omniscient narrator, because you have to have a way for her to know everything that's happening when she's not in the scene. And then in addition to that, she also directly addresses the reader, and I used footnotes. So pretty much I just threw out the rule book. Everything that, debut novelists are not supposed to do, I did in this story.
You get to do it because it's that good.
I had fun doing it.
Good. Can you tell me maybe what was the most difficult thing about writing The Wolf's Curse?
Okay, well, first of all, I wrote the first draft in 30 days. I fast drafted the first draft and I sent it off to a beta reader. And she told me it really wasn't working very well, because even though I had written this book with death as the narrator, there was no death in the story. So I threw it out and I completely rewrote the story. So the very hardest thing was, I think, finding the right story to tell, but then also all of the technical aspects I talked about it, just in terms of making sure that my readers really connected with both the narrator and the main character. And then also I spent a lot of time working on the ending, because I really wanted the emotional resonance to be there for the readers.
And I will say it definitely does. I cried really hard. Let's see. So you've mentioned narration a lot, and I really do agree. It's one of the most compelling parts of the novel. Some reviews have even likened it to the narration of The Book Thief, and a series of unfortunate events. And I really do have to agree with that. Without giving too much of the story away, can you tell us how you decided on that specific narrator for the story?
Yeah, so the genesis of the story, the inspiration for the story, was actually The Book Thief. I was standing in front of my bookshelves trying to decide when I wanted to write next. And I pulled out a worn copy of The Book Thief, and I'd read it many times before, but it was, again, a light bulb moment where I went, wow, that would be so cool to write with death as the narrator for middle grade. So I completely forgot where I was going with that. What question did you ask me?
That's how you decided on the narrator. Yeah.
So yeah, I was writing. So I had decided Grim Reaper was the narrator, but I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to turn the sort of Grim Reaper tropes on its head, because I think for middle grade readers in particular, to me, the Grim Reaper is really frightening, and that's how we talk about death with young children. Like there's this dark, shrouded figure and carrying this scythe, and so I wanted death to feel more accessible. And so I started by first deciding that death would be a woman, and then I decided maybe an animal would be a little bit more accessible for middle graders. And I initially thought about using a crow, but from a craft perspective, that didn't really present many challenges. If you have a death-like character who can just swoop in, steal the soul, and fly off, there's not a lot to be done from a plot perspective there. So I knew it had to be a four-legged critter. And then just as soon as I thought about a wolf, that just felt right for my story. But I did have a problem, because I had already decided I wanted a sort of medieval-ish French-inspired setting, and there aren't any great white wolves, or any white wolves anywhere actually in the world except the Arctic. So I had to invent a great white wolf to fit my story. So that's how I ended up with Wolf as the narrator.
Well, that is so lovely. I like that. With also being dark at the same time. I think you maybe kind of spoken to this a little bit, but I'd like to know where you got the inspiration for your novel as a whole.
Yeah, it really and truly was standing in front of the bookshelf and seeing the copy of The Book Thief, and just realizing that I wanted to try to write a story with death as the narrator. The thing is, I had written, my first 5 novels were all pretty dark and pretty heavy, and I was feeling kind of tired of that. So I really wanted to do something lighthearted and something fun. So I thought, oh, I'll write an adventure. Maybe it'll be kind of like a humorous fantasy where this kind of quirky wolf character is trying to convince somebody to take her job. And that was the first draft that I told you about, and the one that my beta reader was like, yeah, this doesn't work at all. You need to start over. So that's when I realized that if I was going to write about death, I had to really embrace it and write about it in a very real and honest way.
I absolutely agree that you successfully did that. So I I feel like a lot of middle grade novels often have the stereotype of being childish and maybe very silly, having very silly jokes. But I think that The Wolf's Curse just destroys that stereotype, particularly because of its major themes, both death and truth. Could you tell us a little bit more about the themes of the novel, as well as the importance of not underestimating the intelligence of your audience?
Yeah, so obviously death and grief is the main theme in the novel. But also I think especially with the middle grade market, it's really, really important to leave them with hope. So to me, the real takeaway from the novel is that no matter how dark things seem, or no matter what you're going through, there is always room for hope and healing. But because I was writing about death and grief for a middle grade market, I really wanted to, as I said, make it accessible, but also recognize that they can handle a lot more than we give them credit for. And I think so often there's this sense in our culture that childhood should be this really naive or just very innocent space where children don't have to worry about anything. But the truth is, like, now we're obviously living through a worldwide pandemic, but before that, there was gun violence, there's poverty, there's drug abuse, there's domestic violence. And even if kids aren't experiencing that in their own homes and in their own lives, they're certainly seeing it with their classmates at school, and they're seeing it on social media. So I think when you're tackling topics like this, it's really important to be honest and to give them a safe space where they can see the hard truths, but also a space where they can process it and come out the other side feeling hopeful and hopefully a little bit healed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. For me, I always point to, I don't know if you've watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. Also, I feel like deals with these themes of these adult themes with such grace and gentleness, but also just a very powerful honesty that I think not only makes it a really suitable story, The Wolf's Curse, a very suitable story for young children, but really for all ages.
Yeah, it seems like it's really been resonating with adults and children. And I think that's one of the fun parts about writing fantasy too, is that you can take really heavy themes, but because it's in this very unique fantasy world, if you have younger readers or readers who aren't really wanting to delve into the emotional themes, there's still a really fun story to be had. But then for older readers or adult readers who are looking for the deeper themes, that's there too. So I think fantasy can just be so multi-layered in that way.
Absolutely. Oh, I totally agree. Well, that is so wonderful. I do hope everyone goes out and buys Wolf's Curse and reads it multiple times, because it really is so lovely. I wanted to turn a little bit into writing and technique. Can you tell us a little bit about your typical writing process?
Yeah, so that's really evolved over time. As I said, when I first started out, I would just sit down and I just wrote out a story of a memoir. And I've sort of developed a process that works for me through the years. So the most important part of my process now is that before I start writing, I really want to know my characters' want and my characters' need. And I tend to think of my characters' want as something often superficial, but for sure external. So their want is what's going to drive the plot of the story. And then that's what they start with at the beginning of the story. That's what I show the reader in the first chapter. Okay, the character is going to go after this thing, and the plot of the book is going to be them going after that thing. But then the character has this unconscious need, and that's usually something internal, and it's something that they don't know that they need, and that's the thing that's actually going to make them happy or that's going to show some character growth. And so if I know what that need is, then I know what the themes are going to be in my story, because the character is going to be chasing that want the entire time, and then at the end realize that they really need this need instead. And the other nice thing about knowing the want and need, besides driving the plot, is that if you know what your character wants at the beginning, you pretty much know what your climax is going to look like, because the climax is going to be the point in your story where your character comes up against either getting it or not getting it. And you have to make the decision at that point what's going to happen. But if you know those two things, it really informs so much about your story. So that's my primary tool that I use.
That's excellent. So is that also how you plan your novel? How do you kind of fill in outside of that want and the need?
So I just have a very simple Word document where I list the character's want and the character's need. And so for the Wolf's Curse, for example, I did that for my wolf, and I did it for the two main characters, Gage and then his friend Rue. And then I go through the major plot points. So just what's the inciting incident? What's the hook? What's the first plot point? Usually I know a midpoint because I think that's pretty important. Otherwise, you get into the saggy middle business. And then, like I said, I always know the climax. I don't usually know the second plot point, to be quite honest, because to me, you kind of find that out as you write. But I like to have just an idea of a couple of the big plot points, and then I just sit down and write. And I find as long as you know where you're headed, I don't end up throwing out as much of my work as I used to. Well, except that really bad first draft that I wrote. But that was
There's
just
always a bad first draft. That's what they're there for. They're there to be bad, and then you throw them away, and then you learn.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you're a plantser. I don't know if you've heard the plantser, but certainly those are really hard to say on their like together. Wow, I didn't realize that.
I'm definitely a plantser. Yeah.
Me too. I like the discovery piece, like knowing kind of your characters, but still having an adventure of your own, like a reader would.
That's right. Because to me, if you know, like, I love people who can outline. I'm very envious of that. But for me, part of the joy of writing is the discovery of what's going to happen. So I just kind of want a roadmap so I don't go too far off course, but I still want to be able to let things just come to me organically as I write.
Excellent. So how do you edit? This is kind of a two-part question. How do you edit what you write? And then how do you tell when something is like done or ready?
So my editing process is pretty heavily dependent on my beta readers. I have a really close-knit circle of beta readers. And so I will send out my draft to 2 or 3 people and get their feedback. And then I will sit down and make just a list, and I'll start with the big stuff at the top and then go down to the little stuff at the bottom and just attack it that way. So it's pretty simple, but I'm not very good at looking at my own work and seeing what works and what doesn't. So I do rely on outside readers to tell me that.
Especially when you've been so like sunk in it for so long, it's really hard to tell objectively, okay, like what is really going on here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's taken me a lot of years to find readers who really give me the kind of feedback I need. Like, I do think that's an ongoing process too. But once you find people who really kind of understand your work and can tell you when you're off track, and it just becomes a much simpler process when you can go, oh, okay, yeah, they're right. I'm going to change that. And it's not that you always agree with the suggestions they make, right? It's just that they can point out where something isn't quite working. And then if it's somebody you trust, you can brainstorm with them and figure out how to fix it. So it's a very collaborative process.
That's excellent. So how do you find good beta readers? Is it like a test sort of thing, or do you search on certain sites?
For me, it's almost all been virtual. So initially, I don't know if you've ever heard of the writing conference Write on Con. It started out as a free conference that was held, I think it's held in February of every year. The year that I did it, it was held in August, but it's a free or very minimally priced virtual writing conference. It's like $15 or $20 to attend, but you can post samples of your work. So I think I want to say like the first page of your work and also the first page of your query and your synopsis. And then it's just forums where you can go back in and give people feedback. And so I had done that many, many years ago. And a number of people were very active on that site, and they joined together to form a writing group. And then from there, I just became very involved in the writing community, and friendships formed also through my mentoring. So to me, just really getting involved, because the more people you meet, and you kind of have to just go out on a limb and start asking people, do you want to trade work? And it's a good idea to do trial periods, because somebody might be really brilliant and they might be really great at giving feedback, but it's just not the kind of feedback you need for your work. So it's just a matter of trial and error until you find exactly the right fits.
Excellent. Do you have both beta readers and critique partners, or just beta readers?
I do. So I actually have 2 groups of people. One is a critique group that we meet once a month and we read pages, and we tend to give very line level feedback and also do some big picture brainstorming. And then I have a group of beta readers. We actually meet weekly, but we only meet weekly to talk big picture stuff. We don't do any line level stuff. So a little bit of both.
That's so excellent. I'm sure that was really great during the pandemic too, to have this kind of built-in community and just kind of keep your social life going.
It's been amazing. Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Now, finally, are there any writing tips that you can provide our participants and novelists who are heading into National Novel Writing Month, writing 50,000 words in November?
Okay, writing tips. One thing I would say is before you start each scene, one thing that I always do is I write down what my goal is as an author. So, what do I need to accomplish in this scene to move the story forward? And then I write down what does my character expect to have happen in this scene? And then I write down what actually happens in the scene, because then I can make sure I'm accomplishing what I need to accomplish from a writing perspective, but I'm also making sure there's tension in the scene, because a lot of times it's the tension between what the character thinks is going to happen and what actually happens in the scene that keeps the reader engaged. So I definitely recommend doing that. And I just put that right in my document at the start of every scene so I can go back and reference it. And then when I'm done writing that scene, I will take it out. Another tip would be the saggy middle. We all run into trouble with the saggy middle. So if you're having trouble and you're starting to feel stuck in your middle, maybe just think about whether or not your antagonist is strong enough. And then there's also a really cheap writing craft book. It's something like Write Your Novel from the Middle. And I think it's by James Scott Bell. And it's only a few bucks online, but he talks about having a midpoint moment, like a mirror moment where you really state explicitly the theme in your story. And I think if you have that midpoint moment and you're writing toward that, that can also really help with the messy middle part. So yeah, hopefully those tips help. But also remember that you're not going to write a masterpiece in 30 days, right? Like what you're trying to do is get all the sand in the bucket so that you can go back later and sculpt it into what you want it to be.
That's excellent. I love all of those tips. Yeah, I'm going to go buy that book. So I did want to turn, we have a couple of participant questions, making sure I didn't miss anybody. So Pistachio Ice Cream asked, having just finished reading Wolf's Curse, I wanted to ask you how you approach the task of tackling heavy themes like grief and death in the context of a novel aimed at younger audiences. I know we spoke to this a little bit more, but wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything there.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was just really approaching it honestly. So when there were the scenes where somebody died, I didn't shy away from that or skip over it. I really took care to show what it looks like honestly, and to make sure that I was trying to portray the grief honestly, because there isn't any one right way to grieve. It's not just feeling sad all of the time. And so trying to show all of the different emotions. But then the most important thing for middle grade readers really is the hope, making it feel hopeful. And so I was very attentive to making sure it just didn't feel too down or too dark. And I think one of the ways that I did that was through the narrative device, because the wolf is so snarky. And so hopefully that made readers kind of giggle and laugh, even when, you're dealing with some really heavy stuff and you have this wolf kind of with her running commentary, that kind of lightened things that I think brought some levity to an otherwise really heavy story.
Yeah, I agree that I loved the asides from the wolf. I was always looking forward to the little parentheses marks and like, oh, what's she gonna say? Also from Pistachio Ice Cream, how much research went into the Wolf's Curse?
Not a tremendous amount. So before I started writing The Wolf's Curse, my fifth novel was actually set in a sort of similar time frame, roughly medievalish or Renaissance-ish. And so I did read a couple of books about just writing in the Middle Ages, read a couple of books about that. And then right before I wrote The Wolf's Curse, when I was getting ready to do that second draft, I did research death rituals around the world a lot, because one of the problems with the first book was that I didn't know what I wanted my death rituals to look like. Like there weren't any in that book, first of all, but I knew I didn't want real world rituals. So I did a lot of research on what does death look like around the world. And I realized that the way we as Western cultures approach death and grief is much different than how a lot of other cultures approach it. So I did research that a lot, but I also didn't want to appropriate. So I didn't end up using any of that research. It just sort of opened my mind to the fact that death and grief didn't have to look on the page like it looks to us in our everyday lives. So it kind of inspired me, I guess. Other than that, not a lot of research, just trying to keep myself out of trouble in terms of not putting something on the pages that just very obviously would not have been available in a loosely medievalish setting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's great. All righty. So, we got another question coming in. Awesome. Yeah, if anyone has additional questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. This is from Kate Lima. What does your writing day look like? What's your routine?
I can't say that I have a super set routine. I do try to get up early and get an hour of work in before I have to get the kids off to school. I try to do most of my writing in the morning, like right after I get the kids off to school, because that's when I'm usually at my best. I'm the freshest and not tired and exhausted from the day. I try to do that every day, but I also have always felt the freedom. Like, I don't really buy into this concept of writer's block. To me, writer's block is just the sense that you need to give your brain more time to stew on something. So there have been times where, because either things were going on in my personal life, I made a move from the US to Canada, or I had things going on with kids, where I will walk away from writing for a month and I don't beat myself up for that, or I get stuck with a story and I don't beat myself up for that. I just go live my life and do other things. But I always come back to the idea that this for me has always been something that I viewed as a career. And so I try to be really professional about it. And when I am going to write, I try to take it seriously and really get in my writing time each day.
Yeah, and what you said about there's not too much of a thing of writer's block. Our executive director, Grant, thinks the same thing. It's something else that is there. It's not necessarily writer's block.
Yeah. I think people get really hung up on that, and it's scary. It is scary to not know
Yes.
where to go next, but that just means that sometimes your best ideas come when you just walk away and you just let things simmer. And even if you think you're not working on an idea, something is happening in the back of your mind. And in fact, usually I'll go off and read other books that are about completely different things. And then all of a sudden, like, something will just come to mind. Or after a couple of weeks, I'll brainstorm with some friends and I'll come up with the right idea. But it's fear, right? Like, I think writer's block is really fear. And fear is what sort of halts the creative process completely. And so just letting go of that fear and accepting the process. And that's easier to do the longer you write. I mean, I had a lot of fear when I was younger. Now that I've been doing this so long, I know that at some point it's going to work out. And so I don't tend to get into that very scared place quite as easily anymore.
That's so great. Yeah, it's definitely practice. I'm sure comes into it a lot. Also, just like letting your subconscious do its work, even though it might not feel like it's doing anything, it is, and trusting yourself that you'll come up with something.
That's it. Yeah.
Kate Lima also asked, have you thought of going back to your memoir?
Probably not. The memoir was important for me to write for a lot of reasons, mostly from a therapeutic perspective. But I also learned that I have a really bad memory, and a lot of stuff that went into the memoir isn't necessarily my memories. It's things that I have a very large family. And so it was my mom telling me this is what happened, or my sister's memory. And a lot of what I thought happened wasn't what happened according to them. And just writing a memoir is really hard and really messy. And I'm glad I did it, but I don't really have any wish to go back and revisit that.
Yeah, memoirs seem really, really difficult to me. A lot of emotions.
Yeah, well, and you need the same arcs that you have in writing fiction, but life isn't an arc, right?
Yeah.
So figuring out how to put that into a story, I think, is really difficult.
Excellent. Well, if it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in, but if we do have questions, I'll be sure to ask them. I do have a little game. So the wolf curse really reminded me of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Oh, I see a cat. So I thought it might be fun to play sort of a guessing game. I have put together the plots for 5 well-known fairy tales, but they're all written in emoji. So I want to see if you can guess them. Are you up for the challenge?
I am. I'm probably going to embarrass myself, but let's do this.
That's okay. The chat can help if they so choose.
All right. I'm counting on you, viewers.
Okay. Let me share my screen. I have it up. We might see. Oh, I can't share my screen. Oh, no. It says I'm not able to. So we may not. Oh, okay. Catherine is working on it. Technical difficulties, everyone. If anyone has any other questions, Jessica, if you had anything else you wanted to share with us while we wait.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of pressure.
What's your cat's name?
Well, okay, so I'll give you a little hint about my second book, because you had asked at the very beginning about the title, and I can't share the title yet. But what I will tell you is that it's set in the same world as the Wolf's Curse, but it's set in a nearby country with a completely different set of magical rules and a completely different set of characters. So I consider the Wolf's Curse my death book, and the next book is going to be the opposite of that. but that's all I'm going to say.
And you said it's coming out next year?
It comes out next fall. Yeah, we don't have an
fall.
exact date yet.
But. Okay. Oh my gosh. Was the country mentioned in Wolf's Curse?
It was.
Okay, I'm gonna go back and look. Try and narrow it down.
A careful reader will be able to figure it out. And a careful reader will be able to figure out the premise of the next book too. So
that just gives me even more reason to reread. Oh, that's so exciting. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me see if I can. Oh, I can share my screen now. Awesome. Well, that was a great interlude. Let me find the window that I'm looking for and sharing my screen. And let's see if this will work. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
What fairy tale are these emojis trying to tell?
I'm going to say Sleeping Beauty.
No, guess again.
What? The Poison Apple. Am I thinking of the wrong one? Sleeping Beauty is with the dwarves, right?
Nope. Oh, so you got the right story, but the wrong title.
Oh, what's the title? Okay, I know this one. See, I told you I have a terrible memory, and I'm put on the spot. Okay, readers, you're supposed to be helping me, or viewers. What's the title of the one with the dwarves? Snow White.
Yeah, Snow White.
I totally knew it. I just had
with
the wrong.
The snowflake. That was my. I was like, I'll put a snowflake in.
I knew the story. I just couldn't get to the title.
The story is more important than the title. Right. Okay, what about this one?
Oh, is this The Princess and the Frog?
Yes, I'll accept that. Also the Frog Prince. I would have accepted as well.
The genesis of that.
Yes.
Oh, Cinderella?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, is that a clock or a Ferris wheel?
It is a spinning wheel.
A spinning wheel. Okay. Yeah, Rumpelstiltskin.
Nope. Actually, this also could probably be Rumpelstiltskin, but it is not. Think of the sleeping.
Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Oh, Three Little Pigs.
Yes, this one was my favorite to put together. It looked so cute.
It's so cute. I love it.
That was so fun. Yay! Good job. I will say you got all of them. Let me. Can I unshare my screen? Stop share. There we go. So your prize is a cute little pencil case from NaNoWriMo. I don't have a picture. I forgot to get the picture. But all of our monthly donors will also be receiving this really cute pencil case. I believe it says like caution, imaginative stuff inside. But it's really, really cute. So we'll be sure to send you one as a thank you for joining us on our very first webcast today. I also want to thank Catherine, who's behind the scenes producing. And I also want to thank all of our monthly donors who are donating every month and supporting NaNoWriMo. So thank you to everybody who is here today. We'll include a link to purchase The Wolf's Curse below. Make sure that's included so everyone can read this absolutely wonderful book. Other than that, that is all we have for you today. Thank you again so much, Jessica, for joining us. And I hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful day.